Okay, the webinar is now live. We're going to just wait a few minutes until everyone comes in. The numbers are popping up. This is always the nerve-wracking part, waiting, you know, until everyone comes into the room.
I'm trying not to say anything too embarrassing while we're waiting.
Okay. Okay, so let's just give it about another minute. It's only 1 o'clock.
No, we can take our time. See, the questions are already coming in. Adam is way ahead of the game. If you don't mind, Shai, if it's okay, I'll answer his question.
Okay, sure. Well, until everyone else comes in, sure.
So the answer is that there's no requirement to use any bank. A lot of people are going to banks where they have relationships with. It's sometimes a bit more difficult if you don't have a relationship with a bank. They may be a bit more hesitant. And so you should feel free, and I want to be very clear because Yaguda is not endorsing the use of any particular bank. We're just here as a guest and happy to help. But if Cross River is an option, we don't require pre-existing relationships or opening up accounts or anything. And so feel free, and we're going to talk a bit more about this today, but you can feel free to go to crossriver.com and take a look at the application flow. So Adam, I hope that was helpful, and feel free to reach out if we can do anything more.
Okay, so
the option is seasonal businesses are a little bit trickier. For seasonal businesses, you're not going to get through and again, if we're talking about Cross River specifically, you're not going to get through. Oh, I'm already getting a pushback. We should answer it live. Okay, we're going to wait.
Okay. Okay, so let's just get started, Phil, so that we can go through the presentation, and then as the questions come in, either we'll try disturbing you or we'll answer them at the end. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining. So first I want to thank the team at Cross River for giving us the time. It's for many of them, it's a legal holiday. They spent a lot of time setting up both this webinar and the whole PPP program. They were great partners last time around, and this time around also working with us, working with the community, and we really appreciate that partner. Phil and I go way back from our times in our cell together, and it's great to come back together and connect. So before we get started on this PP, just want to realize that this is one aspect of the CARES Act 2 that came about. There's many different things people should look into, and I just want to, even though this webinar specifically itself is focused on the PPP, every business, every nonprofit should look into ways that they can benefit for the situation, whether it's going to be RTC, whether it's going to be any of the family leaves and sick leaves, or I know that we had in our office, we had a meeting, I think it was on Friday on Erev Shabbos, with focusing on some government funding specifically towards education institutions, that you cannot double dip both of them. So these are things that everyone should look into as you apply to see what's going to work best. Obviously, everyone's going to have an accountant, a broker, a bank to work with and talk to. So you'll ask the questions, but you have to really do some of your own internal research to see what works best for you. And I just want to lay that at the beginning, that this is one piece of many webinars that are going to be going on. This will hopefully work you through the specific Cross River application, but it'll be applicable to most applications in any bank site you use. If I understand correctly, the application process opened up fully today on Cross River, right, Phil?
Yeah, our application flow opened up today, and the SBA will start accepting the applications tomorrow.
Okay, great. So then
to get ahead.
Right, good. So everyone can then start getting on it today on their application process, and then hopefully over the next few days work on it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of applications came into Cross River last time, and it's going to be busy, but hopefully they've upped their staff like they did last time, and they got a lot of people working on it. And we have with us today, so Phil Goldfeder, who's I think vice president of something over there?
Public affairs.
Public affairs. Okay, great. And Michael Levy is working on the PPP underwriting. So I'm going to give it to you guys to go through both the questions, what makes people applicable, that they could apply for it, and then also the process itself. And we'll deal with some of the questions as we go along. So I'm handing it off to you, Phil. Go for it.
Great. Thank you so much to Shai. And let me first and foremost thank the Aguda, not just for setting up today's webinar, but more importantly for all the work they do throughout the year. I'm gonna go right into a question that I know is gonna come up, and Shai, know that we talked about it before, because I think it sort of lays out a perfect introduction. A big question I get all the time, particularly from Jewish organizations and from other organizations, is parsonage, right? Is parsonage allowed to be taken as part of your PPP application? And Shai is starting to wonder, like, why am I starting with this? And the answer is simply, when PPP started, April 3rd, and I'll give you a quick history, the CARES Act passed in late March of 2020. The program officially opened on April 3rd. Cross River was open for business the first day, but unfortunately the rules weren't all finished yet. The SBA was literally still coming out with new guidance every day, similar to what's happening right now. Every single day we think we're complete, and all of a sudden additional guidance comes out that we have to adjust for. And so the issue of parsonage came up in early April, and we were getting this question from yeshivas, and the SBA guidance was very unclear. And at that point, how do we deal with this, right? And advocacy organizations like the Aguda and so many others reach out to all their contacts, reach out to us, reach out to so mmany others, and ultimately got clarity. In this case specifically, Shai didn't mention, I'm a recovering politician. I'm an aspiring banker, as you're all going to learn. I've sort of jumped into the banking world, particularly with small business lending. But I spent a lot of time working for Senator Schumer. And in the case of parsonage, specifically for me, I know that I went straight to him to talk about what the issue was with parsonage and how it's going to impact our yeshivas. And ultimately, we saw just a few days later that was changed. And that's, again, thanks to Senator Schumer at the time, and obviously our so many members of Congress, but of course to the Aguda for their tireless advocacy to make sure that issues relating to non-for-profits, issues relating to yeshivas are specifically addressed in the PPP program. And more importantly, from the bank's perspective, we want to be as real time as possible. And so too often times the SBA changes the regulations, and it could take many banks, a week, 2 weeks to actually implement that change. For Cross River, we like to think that we're nimble and we're able to make those changes on the fly, especially if it relates to helping yeshivas on not-for-profits. And so with that as introduction, let me also just welcome Michael Levy. Michael Levy joined Cross River a few months ago specifically to help us with the Paycheck Protection Program. We recognized right after we finished round one, Cross River was one of the largest lenders in the country. Not the largest lender in New York and not the largest lender in New Jersey, but across the country, it was Chase, Bank of America, and Cross River. And the reason is we've used our innovative technology to enable us to automate a lot of the flows that most banks have to do manually. And so as an example of that, whereas it took Bank of America almost 10,000 employees to operate the PPP program in round one, Cross River was able to do it with less than 100. And so after we finished round one, we recognized we did need additional talent. And I'm excited that Michael Levy has joined us as our head of underwriting. And the reason I have him here is because, as I mentioned, we're able to do the quantity of loans that we do because we've automated a lot of the systems. Michael's job is to, number one, make sure that that automation is accounting for all the underwriting standards that the SBA provides for. But as I mentioned earlier, with examples like parsonage, and I know we're going to get the question about seasonal businesses and summer camps, Michael's job is to obviously work on the fly to adjust our underwriting standards, and in many, many cases to actually pull loans into a manual flow so we can get them through our process. And so, Michael, it's an honor to have you with us through the program, and of course, joining us here today. Let me just very quickly run through the basic parameters, and then I'll share my screen and we'll do a very quick, and shouldn't be more than 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully. And Shai, feel free to interrupt any time. And of course, Michael, it's your job to correct me whenever I say something wrong, so don't hesitate. But very, very quickly, the second draw loan is very similar to the first draw loan. And so there's a few things that are important to remember. Number one, if you did not get a round one loan, you're absolutely, and you're eligible, you're still able to get it. The Cross River application is accessible to people who did not yet get round one and are looking for round two. So if you did not, let's just start with this. If you did not get round one loans, the parameters for those loans are the same. You can feel free to go to our website or go to any participating bank, and you can apply for a round one loan. Round two loans, most of the parameters have remained the same. And so many of you here, and there are quite a few of you here, who have taken a round one loan are now here to talk about or learn about a second draw loan. And the answer is most of the rules and the regulations are the same, except for 3 key areas. Number 1 is the maximum loan amount. Now, if you took your last loan from Cross River, we capped loans at $2 million anyway, but loans are now capped at $2 million for round 2. Employee count, right? And Michael, please, if I get it wrong, make sure you correct me. In round one, in round one, you were capped out at 500 employees. If you had, you were eligible for the loan if you had less than 500 employees. For round 2, it is 300 employees. And so that is going to knock off a significant amount of organizations. And number 3, and I think the one item that most people are focusing on is revenue reduction. The SBA is requiring for round 2 loans that you have seen a 25% revenue reduction quarter over quarter, 2019 to 2020. So first question, we'll hit it right out of the box. You can't compare, it's got to be the same quarter in 2019 to the same quarter in 2020. Meaning, if you're going to use Q1 2019, you have to use Q1 2020. Q3 2019 has to be compared to Q3 2020, and you have to be able to show a 25% revenue reduction. And for those of you who have been paying attention the last couple of days, you'll say to me, but those documentations per the SBA is not required for loans below $150,000. And so let me clarify, because this is a very important point. We're going to go through the application flow for Cross River. I just said that in order to be eligible for round 2, you have to have seen a revenue reduction. However, the SBA is not going to require proof at the time of application. And so you do have to have a revenue reduction of 25% quarter over quarter. However, the SBA at the time of application is not going to require you to prove it. You're going to have to sign a document attesting to the fact that you did have it. And then when it comes time for forgiveness, the SBA is going to require that you show the documentation. And so I don't want anybody to think that, like, you know, they could pull a fast one. They didn't require any documents and look, I got it through. I want to be very clear. The SBA is eventually going to require the documents, but in the interest of speeding the money to the people who need it most, they're not going to require those documents for loans below $150,000. Now, if your loan is $200,000, then be prepared to show that documentation. And so those are the basic parameters, but just to quickly review sort of the parameters from round 1, obviously it's SBA guaranteed 100%. No collateral is going to be required. No personal guarantees. And I'm saying this to you because there's a lot of people out there who are, and I'm sure each and every one of you have gotten emails soliciting you to come to their site. They're going to charge you, no fees. I want to be clear about the rules. No personal guarantees, no collateral. The interest rate is going to be 1% non-compounding over 5 years. That is only for portions of the loan that are not forgiven. Meaning, if the loan ultimately is forgiven by the SBA, and if you followed all the parameters, your loan will be. But if it is not forgiven, the loan is a simple 1% loan over 5 years. As it was in the first round, 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. And so your eligible number is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll up to $2 million. I'm just running through. Yeah, go ahead.
For NASDAQ 72s.
Oh, go ahead, please, Michael.
So if you're a food or accommodation services business, so that means your NASDAQ code starts with a 72, then you will get 3.5 times, not 2.5 times like last round. So you get that extra month of average monthly payroll.
Okay, and one other important point on round 2 loans is that you have to have spent or will have spent by the time you get the disbursement for round 2 all of the money you got in round 1. Now, another question that we get very often is you don't have to have forgiveness for round 1 in order to be eligible for round 2. And I know that is a very important question because people say, well, I didn't get to do my forgiveness yet. You don't actually have to have been forgiven for round 1. You just have to have spent all the money. There was no requirement. I believe in round 1, you had 10 months to start your forgiveness process. If you haven't done it yet, you're not in any trouble. You're just as eligible for round 2. But to be clear, you must have already finished spending the money in round 1 to get round 2. And I'm just going to No, that's it. And those are the, okay, so those are the major parameters. I'm gonna go and just share my screen for a second. And Shai, do me a favor and tell me what you're seeing in 1 second. Okay, so this is, you're seeing our website. When you go to crossriver.com/PPP, or if you just go to, and again, I want to be very clear, and I can't say this enough, you know, the good is in no way endorsing you come to Cross River. We're happy to provide our service. I would like to think that we have an easier and sort of user-friendly application flow. As I told you, we've automated most of our processes, and we don't set parameters in terms of who can come to Cross River. I like to say that we've democratized the system, and so whether it's a small loan, small organization, big organization, if you qualify, you can feel free to come to Cross River. Our application is, and I will just, and so if you go to our website, right here at the top, apply now for the Paycheck Protection Program. Our application is open as of this morning. Shai, as you pointed out, as of this morning, our full application is open. It's going to direct you here. Now, before I click on apply now and walk you into our application flow quickly, it is important, and I cannot stress this enough. And if I don't stress this enough, my customer service team is going to be very, very upset. It is very important that you scroll down, you take a look at the program highlights, okay? So you have a basic sense of the parameters, and most importantly is you read the FAQs. Now I know this is sort of usually if I have any problems, I'll read the FAQs and see. Read the FAQs before you start the program. I'm going to say it again because I will get in a lot of trouble, because the goal here is to limit how much friction you have with the application. I don't want, the goal is not to have you have to talk to me or talk to customer service or call Shai or call a broker. The idea is to understand what we're looking for, understand the required documents, and be able to get through the application in about 12 minutes. That is a fact. You should be able to get through this application in about 12 minutes. For most borrowers that have all the application, all the documents that are required. And so here are all the frequently asked questions, right? And we say they're frequently asked questions because we get them asked frequently. We talk to our customer service on a nightly basis. We take all the information that people have asked and we compile it into additional questions. And so you're going to notice every single day for the next 2 months, this is going to be updated. And so if you say, well, I looked there yesterday and my answer wasn't there, go back, look again, okay? Later today, you're going to see additionally helpful hints. Things like, apply from a desktop. Don't use your phone. Make sure that you have clear PDFs when you upload your documents. You're going to see a little later today, it's going to be updated again with some helpful hints to try and get you through. Let me also just say one more thing before I go into the application. And so let's say you have everything, you have all your documents. There's going to be a tab right here under the pictures that's going to tell you exactly what documents you need. As a matter of fact, I actually think it's in one of our FAQs now. Payroll, anything that's supposed to. No, it's in here somewhere. Here. What are the documents required to complete the application? Now, just for everybody's ease of use, can you see this? Or is this coming up? For everybody's ease of use, we're going to take this and we're going to put it at the top because it's one of the #1 questions we get. What documents am I going to have to provide? And so if you're an independent contractor, sole proprietor, self-employed, corporation, and you click on either one, corporations, it's going to populate with exactly the documents you should prepare. So don't go into the application flow and then start, figuring it out. If you prepare the documents in advance, you have clean PDFs, it's going to be a very, very simple, 12-minute process. And so again, once you have your documentation, you'll be able to go into the application. And once again, it's loading. I hope it works right now because that would be embarrassing if it didn't. There it is, the application. Let me also clarify, you're all getting emails from multiple different brokers who are partnering with Cross River. Cross River has almost 100 partners that are helping promote, collect loans, and get the information out there. And so in this case, I'm showing you Cross River's application, but in many cases, you're going to see one of our partners' names and it's going to say powered by Cross River. The application flow is going to be exactly the same, okay? And so if you're nervous, I don't want to look at this one because if I'm going to use another one. All the application flows are the same. It's going to be the same information. And I was talking to you about the helpful hints. They're also here. They're going to be on that front page as I just showed you. But in case you skip it on the front page, which you shouldn't if you're following the rules, they're going to be here as well. And so again, please complete the application from your desktop computer using Google Chrome browser. Use approved formatting, PDF is preferred. If you're going to contact customer service, Cross River is a relatively small bank. As you all know, we are not even a fraction of Chase and Bank of America, but we're able to make the same amount of loans. We don't have the staff they have. Cross River as a whole is just north of 400 employees. And so even if I put every single employee into customer service, which I obviously can't, we wouldn't have enough to answer all the questions. And so be mindful of the fact that we are going to be very, very busy. And so if you're going to call customer service, and you should try to email is preferable because it enables us to answer the questions a bit quicker. Also avoid busy hours. So avoid peak hours between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. if you really want to make sure that your question gets answered. When you send an email to customer service, include your business name so we can look up your file quicker. And I can't say this enough, and I know I've been saying that a lot, but there are a lot of important points here to try to ease of application for you. Our customer support can't give you advice. They can't tell you, how to calculate. They can't tell you, which numbers are better for you to use. I mean, again, it's pretty self-sufficient. The application is pretty self-explanatory, and you should be able to figure it out. But if you have any questions about your finances or about how your taxes were filed and ultimately which forms you should pull out, you have to call your CPA or somebody for help. Our customer service will not be able to provide that. And just one other small thing, it's not small, it's big when you get into it, and this is something why we put it as number 6. When you put in your application, don't use, and we'll get to this when we're going through the application flow, don't put in your personal bank account information. Use your business account, because I know it sounds silly, but it ultimately will hold up your funding. It'll give us an error. And so while your application may ultimately get approved, we'll have trouble funding your loan when it comes time to actually funding your loan, because a lot of banks will prevent funding of business funds into a personal account. And so with that, I pulled up, and I hope you're seeing this now. This is our application flow. I just showed it to you online. It's the same thing. I just have it in a PDF. It's the same thing as I just showed you. We're going to try and scroll through it and try and point out, and Michael, this is where I'm going to need your help on this one. But we're going to quickly try and go through. So first and foremost, many of you started a pre-application. If you started a pre-application, if you started our application, you can go back and find my application, right? So you don't have to start from the beginning, quite the opposite. If you start from the beginning, it's going to block you and say that you're a duplicate. And so if you already started your application, and by the way, there are multiple points throughout the application, you could stop, you can leave it, you can go consult with an accountant, you'll be able to come back. You'll be able to come back, enter your EIN or your social or your date of birth. I think you need 2 out of 3, and you'll be able to come back and continue your application. Again, I think most of the items in the first 2 pages are pretty self-explanatory, and so we'll just run through it quick. Legal business name, business email, business phone, entity type, EIN, business start date. Business start date is very important, and I'm happy we're doing this because this is something many of you miss. Your business, you must have been in business. And again, I apologize, I'm going quick. I just know we have a lot to cover, and so a lot of questions to get to. Your business has to have been started prior to February 15th of 2020. Okay, and so if your business started in March or April or May of 2020, you are not going to be eligible. Someone says, well, I started my business in January of 2020. You are eligible. We're going to talk in a bit about how do you determine your loss of revenue, because it's obviously a little different. If you weren't in business in 2019, how can you show decrease in revenue? We'll talk about that in a moment, but you have to have been in business, and that is why we ask you, and part of the documents we're going to require later, is you're going to have to prove that you were in business prior to February of 2020. Wherever we can, we try to make it self-explanatory. Here, we're asking you for your NACIS code, right? But if you don't have it, there is a lookup directory. So feel free to take advantage to, most people, and I didn't know what a NACIS code was or NAICS code was until this process started. And so feel free to look it up. Michael's laughing at me. Additional information. Again, nothing here. Number of employees. That's obvious why we need the number of employees. State of incorporation. Again,
Phil, just a question on employees. Can you tell me how we calculate the employees part-time, full-time, And also last time there was a question of, I think, keeping the same employees from one season to another.
So Michael, I think it's only full-time employees or equivalent.
Right, that's what I'm aware of as well. Only full-time.
Yeah, full-time employees. And as I mentioned earlier, for seasonal, again, the rules are a bit different. And I don't want to get into those questions here, but obviously our application flow, we're working to try and make it as seasonal for seasonal businesses as friendly, but ultimately seasonal businesses are going to require a manual review. I apologize in advance to the camps. They're going to require manual review, and we're going to try and get to them as quickly as possible. But because the calculations are just so different and the terms surrounding the seasonal businesses are so different, it was hard to build that into our application flow. And so we're going to try and build in as many of those parameters as possible. But ultimately, hopefully towards the end of the week, we'll have updates to the application. But ultimately, Michael and his team are going to have to sort of pull those out and do the best we can to keep up with the manual flow. The second page, again, personal information, owner information. So the first page was business information. The second page is owner information. Michael, anything you want to point out in terms of owner information?
Nothing in particular. Just fill everything out and make sure that it matches with your driver's license, because we're going to get a lot of issues with that. So please make sure everything matches. And when you give a driver's license, which we'll get to, that your driver's license is not expired.
Interestingly enough, one thing, Shai, if you're a non-for-profit, they say, I knew you were going there. I could see it in your face. You're a non-for-profit. There's no owner. Authorized signatory. It's what we used in round one. It's sort of the SBA blessed. And so authorized signatory would be, and it could be obviously for many nonprofits, it could be more than one person. Just stay consistent, right? So don't change it up. If you're going to pick one person as the authorized signatory, who is the authorized signatory at your non-for-profit, at your yeshiva, that's who you should put as at the owner information. Continuing down. Okay. Again, no big surprises for most of you. And I want to be clear, for a lot of you, I've already filled out the pre-application, did the first 2 pages. We saw very few problems, very few mistakes, very few issues. Application eligibility. So once we hit this point, like I said, it's saved in the system. You're able to come back and do whatever you need or make any adjustments that you need. Here, the SBA has asked us to collect demographic information. In the first round, the SBA didn't require that. Without getting into the politics of it all, the SBA is now requiring demographic information. It is your choice. You do not have to fill it out. You can refuse to fill it out, but the SBA has asked us to collect this information. Once you hit this point, you're going to get this email, okay? This is just a, FYI, you're in the system, your application is saved, feel free to come back. It's a reminder, you're going to get the email. You're going to get a lot of email prompts. I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but just wanted, because this is the first one you're going to get, I thought it was important to show it to you. And it's very clear your current application is incomplete at this point, right? Obviously, there's a lot more to go. Questions, Michael? Do you want to do a quick run through of the questions? I mean, they're fairly simple.
Sure. So, here are the 9 questions. Just run through them pretty quickly. The first one is the applicant or any owner of the applicant presently suspended, debarred, proposed for department, etc. All these questions, just so you know, need to be answered, because if you answer incorrectly, you will be auto-declined by the system. So please make sure you answer them accurately. This is really important for us, because then you get declined and we can't even look at you to help. And then the system will just make you reapply. So just answer these questions as accurately as possible. The last question is, did the business experience 25% loss? That's extremely important. I'll jump into that right now pretty quickly. So there are 3 ways in which you can compare loss. The first way you can compare loss, as Phil said, is by quarter. So you can compare the same quarter in 2019 to the same quarter in 2020. So that would mean if you choose Q1, you would compare Q1 2019 to Q2 to Q1 2020. The second way is if, for example, you don't have a loss in any particular quarter, but in the aggregate for the whole year, you had a 25% loss, then you could actually compare your full year 2020 to your full year 2019. And then the third way is only for businesses that started in 2020. If you're a business that started in 2020, so you would compare Q1 2020 to any of the other 3 quarters in 2020. that's your choice. So you can compare Q1 to Q2, Q1 to Q3, Q1 to Q4.
So I just want to highlight that point because I think it's an important point, right? If you started in January of 2020, you have no documents or records from 2019, Q1 becomes your baseline, right? That becomes your high quarter. After that, you'd have to compare Q1 to Q2, Q1 to Q3, or Q1 to Q4 to show your revenue decline.
Let me just jump in over a question. Is that, first of all, what's counted as revenue? We had people who, first of all, maybe received a Department of Homeland grant for security. It's a one-time grant. Is that counted as revenue?
So the only thing that we know that would not count is previous PPP loans, right? And so other things potentially could be counted. We haven't been given that guidance from the SBA. I can tell you that your round one PPP loan will not count towards your revenue. And so if you're nervous that PPP saved me and didn't give me that 25%, PPP doesn't count. Other grants at this point, we have to assume they would be counted.
And what about specifically, as you know, in New York, there's been a lot of, in most states, about the lunch program. So that was something that was used, especially in the summer, and it's always used. Are you able to find that and look into if that's also counted?
Yeah, we'd have to sort of check in with the SBA and get a better sense. Again, these are the kinds of things, and as I opened with before, similar to parsonage, these are the kinds of things that are going to be unique to different situations that require advocacy in Washington with the SBA to try and get them to change some of the guidance. So yeah, it's something that is, again, as I said, the SBA is changing their guidance day to day. And so it's something that obviously can change. But at this point, the only thing that would be excluded is your first round PPP.
And also, let me just ask you, what about revenue versus receipts, cash versus accrual, or pledges versus actual donations? Do you have any guidance on how that's going to be received?
So the only thing I'll say, and I'm not sure, Michael, if you have anything to add, is obviously it's money in, right? It's receipts, and so pledges are not going to count, and so it is gross receipts and revenue year over year, and obviously you have to be consistent, right? You can't change it midway, and I can't be clear about this. We are not going to ask you to prove it at the time of application. And many people are going to walk away from that and say, I got it, I'm good. You are going to have to prove it at the time of forgiveness. Now, if you're saying to yourself, like, okay, maybe they won't forgive it, I'm happy to pay back the loan, that's fine. That's within your right and your prerogative. What I'm saying to you is if you expect the loan to be forgiven, while you're not going to need to provide the documentation up front, you will need to provide the documentation before you're going to get forgiven.
Phil, can I cut in for a sec? Just to be clear, you only for loans below $150,000 do not have to provide that information up front. If you're requesting a loan amount above $150,000, you have to give that 25% reduction in revenue proof when you apply, or we can't process the loan. So please make sure if you're looking for that loan above $150,000 to provide that information.
Do you want to talk about document requirements very quickly?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the 25% loss, just because we're talking about it already. So for 25% loss, as I mentioned, you can compare 2019 versus 2020 full year, the quarters, so Q1 2019 versus Q1 2020, and then again for 2020, you can choose Q1 2020 to any of the other 3 quarters. When it comes to documents needed or that you're allowed to give in order to prove that revenue reduction, there are 3 options. The first option is tax forms. So you can provide an 1120, you can provide a 999, a 1096. If you're a partnership, all those are allowed. And the 2020, if you don't have it filed, you can actually give us a draft. That is allowed. The second option is you can give us quarterly financial statements. So those also don't need to be audited. So 2019 P&L versus a 2020 P&L. And then the third option is you can give us bank statements. And then we will, you just add up all the credits of the 2019 bank statements for the quarters you give us versus the same for 2020. We'll add those up, and that as long as that shows a 25% reduction, those are good. The other items we require as part of an application for a PPP loan is a voided check and a driver's license. And then another big important item is that you have to show that you were in business as of 2/15/2020. You can give us a bank statement for that. You can give us an invoice, a book of record. Your 1099 miscellaneous can be used. If you have one of those, can also be used. Just please make sure it covers 2/15/2020. I've already seen that we've received some that don't cover that period, and then we have to reach out to you to get that in order to proceed with pushing her on through. So make sure you provide that proof. I know a bank statement is probably the easiest. It's actually even easier for our system to read. So if you have all the options, the best thing you could provide is a bank statement to us for February. Best thing. In terms of proof of payroll, so proof of payroll is going to depend on, of course, entity type. So if you are an independent contractor, if you're self-employed, or you're sole proprietorship, and you have no employees, you need to provide us with either the 2019 or the 2020 Schedule C. I just want to make clear that if you choose to provide for your proof of payroll a 2019 document or a 2020 document, you have to be consistent with the rest of the documents you're giving us. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you want to give, it doesn't apply necessarily for a case of no employees, but we'll get to a case where you're sole proprietor or self-employed with employees. You could give us a 1040C with that shows your health insurance and retirement benefits for your employees. You have to give us the same year for all of that. It has to be consistent. So if you're an independent contractor, you're self-employed or sole proprietor, no employees, it's a Schedule C, 1040 Schedule C. Line 31 is what you're going to use to calculate, not any other line there, just line 31. If you took an economic injury disaster loan or an EIDL loan between 1/31/2020 and 4/3/2020, we're going to need a bank statement just showing that was deposited into your bank account, into your business bank account in that period. And then you would have to just provide us with that 215, that bank statement or that proof of that you're running operations as a 215. If you're a sole proprietor or you're self-employed with employees, you can provide us with a Schedule 1040C for yourself. That's line 31. And then you give us a Form 940 or 4 941s for your employees. I want to make it clear. 1 941 is not good. If you give us 1 941, we're going to request the other 3 quarters. So please, it's either 1 940, which is the annual form, or 4 941s, which are the quarterly forms. If you don't have that, you can provide us with a W-2 or a W-3, or you can provide us with a Form 944.
So I just, and Michael and I, it's funny, and this is where you learn that I'm not the actual banker here, right? When you start to get into your 940s and your 941s, your 1030s and your 612s, if you go to the FAQs, what documents are required to complete the application, depending on who you are, you can go back. What Michael just laid out is all listed in here as clearly as possible. And so, again, if you didn't catch all of that, I apologize. We're just trying to get through it. Feel free to go back into our FAQs and take a look at the documentation you're going to need. Moving on, once you've calculated your dollar amount, your loan amount, obviously your account and routing information, you must be careful when you're entering your routing information. Also very important to know, sometimes for ACHs, your banks have different routing numbers. And so if you've memorized your Chase routing number and Chase account number, and you just enter it in quickly, oftentimes banks have different routing numbers when it's an ACH, okay? And so please check with your bank to make sure, because ultimately the most challenging part that our borrowers find is that they get completely approved, they have all the right documents, but there was an issue with their routing number, or there was an issue with the bank disbursement. And ultimately it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks that your payment is held up. And so please double, triple, quadruple check your bank routing number, and then make sure when you're entering it, and we have you entering it here twice, make sure you check it 3 or 4 or 5 times, because that is going to be the most frustrating thing that you are going to face. And many of you who are listening to me right now are going to say, I know you warned us, Phil. I'm telling you, triple check your routing numbers. After that, as we've mentioned earlier, most of this loan is based on borrower attestation, meaning you have to attest, right? The bank is going to do some basic underwriting. That's where Michael comes in. We're doing underwriting. We have complex systems that are looking at all your documents, that are reviewing all your documents, that are reviewing your submission. But ultimately, if there's a mistake, if there is a problem, you are attesting that everything you put in here is true, and you're going to be held accountable and liable by the SBA. Again, that sort of marks the end. You'll be able to upload all your documents here. Please be careful to label all your documents. And so, sometimes we save them in our computers with long-winded, document names. try and be concise, right? This is a 941, Q1 941, Q2 941, Q3 941. Try and label your documents, because the clearer your documents are, it's not just in terms of your readability, but in labeling your documents. It'll make it that much easier for the system to read it, review it, and get your application complete. Okay. Let me just say one more thing, and I'll jump into questions if you want to pull them offline, or I'll read what you sent me. And by the way, you inundated me with questions that got sent before the webinar. When you see this application is complete, okay, most people think that you're approved and now just wait for your money. Your application complete means your application is complete. It does not mean that you are approved for funding yet. At that point, Cross River internal systems need to review all your documentations. If everything is clean, that could happen in quickly as 5 or 10 minutes. If it's not as clean, it could take 2 or 3 hours. And if it's really a problem, it could get pushed to manual underwriting, in which case Michael Levy and his team will do the best they can to keep up with the amount of traffic. Once your application is approved, we will then submit it to the SBA. And here is a very important update. In round 1, the SBA provided instant approval, meaning the SBA took the bank's word for it that everything is kosher and everything is great, and gave instant approval. So theoretically, if you start your application by 9 o'clock, you could be approved by 9:30 and you could be funded by 11 o'clock, okay? That is unlikely to happen this time, not because a lot has changed from the Cross River side. The SBA has changed the system. And so once we have approved your loan, we submit it to the SBA, and they have told us it can take anywhere between 2 and 48 hours, in some cases even longer, to actually review your documentation and approve the loan. And so we are going to do the best we can to update you. But ultimately, there's going to come a point in the process where the SBA is processing your loan application. Now, I would venture to say, if you've made it through our application process, we're hopeful, if all is going well, that you should do fine with the SBA, but there are obviously no guarantees. And so until it says your loan has been approved and you're set to be funded, your application is still pending. So many people last round said, oh, application complete, and there's a check mark. That must mean that I'm approved for funding. You are not approved for funding until you actually see explicitly that your loan application has been approved by the SBA, you have been given an SBA loan number, and you will be approved for funding. So with that, Shai, and I'm happy just to sort of quickly run through this and see if there was something we didn't cover. And the first question on the list is—
Phil, let me just ask you one question.
Yeah.
So someone asked me that the Cross River application asks for bank statements. Can you advise how to upload the P&L for the revenue reduction documents? I don't know if that's for you or for Michael, whichever one.
Okay, Phil, can I just make a quick point?
Please.
Our system reads bank statements best. So if you can give us bank statements, that's the best way for you to not go to manual. If you provide us with profit and loss statements, it's going to go to my team's queue. I'm just going to warn you, we get hundreds and hundreds of applications to look at. It's not easy for our team to get through it in 1 day, let alone in 2 days. So I'm just warning you, if you can give us bank statements for P&L to show that 25% reduction, that's best because our system reads it. Same thing with the to show that you were in operation as of 2/15/2020. You don't want to be in the manual queue if you can. So if you can provide us those documents, it helps you avoid being in the manual queue, and hopefully that means you get your loan a lot quicker.
The only challenge is that bank statements are going to have in it, perhaps transfers, or it's going to include loans or things like that, which aren't counted as revenue.
Right. So we're, again, this is, as it relates to revenue reduction, right? That's only an issue for loans above 150,000. And we will have to sort of, as the process, and we're not officially even live with the SBA yet until tomorrow morning. As you all know, and probably have imagined by now, every couple of hours, we're reevaluating what's working, what's not working, what documents are being read easily and clearly, and what's not. And we're going to provide additional guidance that's going to get added to our FAQs. And so I can't stress that enough. The FAQs are real-time information that we're getting hour to hour based on that kind of feedback, right? And so we won't know specifically for revenue reduction, meaning what you said is right. How, like, the bank statement is going to show a PPP round 1, and so is the automated system going to be able to somehow exclude that? And how would we do that? And so like I said, we're working through the process, and hopefully we'll have additional guidance as we continue to move forward, and urge folks to be patient. The one question I get a lot is, well, I didn't get my round 1 PPP loan through you. Should I come to you for round 2? There's no requirement to go back to the same bank. Is it easier? Let me say this, right? We really have strived to make our application process as simple as possible, regardless. And so if you came to us in round 1, your application is going to take you 12 to 15 minutes as long as you have everything you need up front. If you didn't come to us in round 1, your application is going to take you 12 to 15 minutes, assuming you have all your paperwork in order. Not every bank is created equal. I mean, there's a lot of banks who said they're not taking round 2 applications. This process has been very stressful on banks, and obviously, you shouldn't have to feel bad for the banks, but it's not an easy process. And the banks are hesitant to put additional resources into the PPP program. And so again, sort of, I think what makes Cross River stand out is that we're willing to sort of recognize any loan, any borrower for any loan amount. Will parsonage be allowed if not listed on W-2? So for those of you who were in here in the very, very beginning, yes, parsonage will be allowed. It was something that we worked through last time.
How do we mark that off in the application? How do we prove that? Or we don't have to worry about it till later?
Well, Michael, in terms of how did we prove parsonage in round 1?
If it wasn't on W-2.
So parsonage, we just took whatever document you provided us and we relied on your attestation. So as of now, that's the plan for this round. No change. Unless we get guidance otherwise.
Yeah, unless we get guidance otherwise, and I don't imagine that we will. And so whatever sort of documentation you have, whether it's even just sort of a spreadsheet, just include it, and you're going to have to attest that information is true. What are the likelihoods that the funds have run out? And I jokingly said before the call started that sort of given the new administration, I'm cautiously optimistic that funds will be added to it and the program will likely be extended. No guarantees. At this point, the program is scheduled to end, the program has about $300 billion in it and is scheduled to end March 31st. Now, for those of you who remember back to April 3rd of 2020, and we were going into Pesach, and there was a lot of sort of nervous and fears about what was going to happen. We came out of the second day's Pesach, and the funds had run out. And so obviously a lot of people were scared what was going to happen, and inevitably the government put more money into it. And after that, the funds never ran out again. We don't know. I mean, we're really in uncharted territory here. Obviously the loan pool for second round loans is much smaller than the loan pool was for first round loans. $300 billion is a lot of money. No one really knows. Anybody who tells you that they know is making it up and is trying to give you an answer that you want to hear or potentially an answer you don't want to hear. And so there's no one who has the right answer. I'm optimistic, like I said, that the federal government under the new administration is more likely than not to put money into this program if it does run out. We're accepting applications. And again, I'm just running through these questions as I see them here. We're accepting applications as of this morning. And so, if you go to any one of our partner websites or crossriver.com/PPP, feel free to start the application. Again, read the FAQs first and sort of work through the application. Shai, was there anything, and again, there are so many questions in the Q&A. I mean, I don't even know where to start. If you want to pull something out, something that's, or I can keep going.
I think that what I would like to do is, I think many of the questions, skim through it. I think the biggest question has been understanding how to evaluate the revenue or the revenue reduction. I'm hoping that afterwards we'll go through these lists of 300 and something questions that already came up, and many of them we'll see that are repetitive. Maybe we'll put out an FAQ later if I can go through them. But for most part, the question has been about revenue, but also people were asking about when if they're the only employee or if they own it and they weren't really taking a salary, how that plays out. So like
the answer is yeah. So and I just got this question this morning somewhere else. Someone said, well, we have no payroll. We pay everybody on a 1099. 1099s are independent contractors, and they are eligible on their own to fill out a paycheck protection loan. So if a 1099 employee or I don't know, independent contractor ultimately was laid off, he can fill out his own PPP application, but there's no such thing as double dipping. Remember, it's the paycheck protection program. The idea is to keep people paid. And so if it's a 1099 employee, you may not put in for paycheck protection. I actually got this question, and Michael, I don't want to steal your thunder here because I got excited when someone explained to me the answer. How does someone who takes a draw, right? Like I take a draw, I don't actually get a paycheck, I take a draw. So it ultimately depends, and I got this answer, and I've used it 4 times already. And Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm really out in uncharted territory. But if you got a draw, it depends on how you ultimately it's reported, right? And how you report it. It has to either be on your 1040 Schedule C, right? And I think Michael mentioned this on line 31, or for partnerships and LLCs that file as partnerships, it has to be reported on your K1 in box 14A. And so for those of you who file those documents, you'll know what I'm talking about. But again, it gets very specific in terms of ultimately what you're eligible for. But I want to be clear, the idea here is to maintain payroll or maintain your draw or maintain that level of income. And so, someone says, oh man, I didn't do it, but I want to be eligible or I want to take advantage of this program. Unfortunately, if you didn't file your documents or your taxes that right way, ultimately you're not going to be eligible. Full-time, okay, I'm just going to run through. I'm just going to take a look at the questions then. The question of the grant came up a few times. I got to, you mentioned the food program. At this point, the only guidance that we have is the PPP loan. Someone else asked about the EIDL loan. I'd have to go back and look at the guidance, but I don't believe EIDL loan was included in that either. The only thing the SBA specified was the PPP loan. And so for additional program funds, I know for non-for-profits, this is a big issue, and we're going to update our FAQs to adjust for that. We're going to find out what else can be included.
Phil, let me ask a question. A lot of people have individual questions for their specific situation. Who do you advise them to turn to for these questions? There's some brokers, there's calling Cross River. Tell me what you think.
Okay, so I obviously can't recommend a specific broker. They're all fantastic. Many of them are our partners. As you've seen, many of them are partnering with local organizations and yeshivas to try and help the yeshivas as well. I have no guidance or advice. Some are more knowledgeable than others in various areas, right? Some brokers are used to dealing in a certain area of the non-for-profit sector. And so I'm just saying this because I know who they are, but I'm very hesitant to say them. There are some brokers who know yeshivas. They just that's what they do all day, every day. They help yeshivas sort of facilitate lending and borrowing and financial things. So go to them, right? They're going to have the answers to your more specific questions. There are some brokers who deal specifically with social service organizations, right? They understand the nuances of the social services grants and the security grants and so on like that. And so you should go to that broker. I would advise you, again, read the FAQs, and if in case of doubt, start working your way through the application. Now, don't force your way through the application. Some people think, well, I'll upload some fake document just to get through it. You're going to fail. You're going to cause yourself more aggravation. Start working your way through the application process until you get stuck. Okay. At that time, come up with the question. Meaning, I'm hesitant to answer the question. It looks very complicated. Can you explain it to me? No, I cannot. Okay. What I can do is because we're going to have hundreds of thousands of borrowers, and so the answer is start going through the application. Understand kind of the nuance of the question, right? Well, I have this document, but not that document. At that point, check our FAQs. And if it is not there and you're not comfortable talking to a broker, feel free to reach out to our customer support. But our customer support should not be the first line of defense, right? Because you're going to overwhelm them. And ultimately, I want to be clear to everybody. It's not just because we're not being nice. I mean, we're limited in how many questions we can answer. And if you ask a question that is answered in your FAQ, you're taking away attention or time for them to address a question that's not in our FAQs. And so please be mindful. For the good of the klal, and I don't say this often, this is not everybody is, what we're trying to accomplish here is very, very unusual for a bank our size. And we're trying, most importantly, to help yeshivas and to help maistas and to help non-for-profit organizations get the critical funding they need, which, by the way, is going to be very difficult to get in other places. Because, again, not everybody understands, sort of the different nuances of the organizations. And so for the good of the klal, let's not overwhelm the system for the purpose of overwhelming the system. Go through the application, read the FAQs. If at all possible, and you know a broker or a friend who also had a similar application, call them first. If all else fails, please feel free to reach out to us. We're going to help you. We're going to do the best we can. But I will tell you, in round one, and we've obviously improved our systems tremendously since then, we got tens of thousands of calls a day. And a staff of literally just a couple dozen. It's not a simple process to get through. And so we did the best we could. It happened. It has to happen, right? Yes.
I was waiting. That's why we kept on pushing it, making it go so long. I was waiting for someone to walk in.
Hold on. Yeah, you can have my tape. Okay. I apologize. It's not a Zoom call until that happens.
That's good. It makes it more real. We're all at home anyway, working like this. So especially on a legal holiday, appreciate the time.
Yeah, our pleasure. Look, and I'll also say is that we're in constant communication with Shai and with leadership of the Aguda for two reasons. Number one, there's literally 400 questions in the Q&A. And so we're going to try, and the good folks at the Aguda are going to try and squeeze that into some sort of document that we at the bank can then go ahead and answer. And if it's important and we think it's important enough, we'll put it into our FAQs, number one. And number two, which I think is something that many of you are going to see, there are going to be regulatory changes that need to be made, going back to parsonage, right? And it's going to require the intervention of elected officials in the House and the Senate. I tell Shai all the time, I've got the Senate, Chuck and I go back a long way. He's been very helpful to me through the first round of PPP. But again, it's going to require that kind of intervention. And so don't hesitate to reach out to sort of, let us know and what the issues are, and we'll do the best we can to address them as quickly as we can.
So before we end, I want to just ask a question. Someone sent me that, some of the non-religious institutions don't have to or haven't filed tax returns or 940s. How would they go through their process on the Cross River application to, I guess, put it through if they don't have those files? Michael?
Michael.
Yeah,
That one's definitely you, Michael. No one's
I know. So if they, for 940s or any 2020 tax forms that someone has, right now we accept drafts. So the guidance suggests fill it out to the best of your ability and then send it to us. That's really the best answer we can give you.
There are certain types of religious institutions, I think whether they're synagogues or shul or whatever, that might not have to file those type of things. If they don't have any of the tax, I guess, documents, is there anything that they put in instead of it?
It would depend. Yeah, I'd have to, like a shul wouldn't have to file. I hear that.
Right, meaning
I had some guidance on that last week. I'll get back to you on that, and Shai, if you can, again, obviously we have everybody's information, and maybe we'll do an email blast tomorrow just to give people a little bit. We'll find out. We'll find out what the deal is and how we can deal with that. But again, I want to be clear. Don't just submit a blank document just for the sake of uploading. It's going to get stuck in the system, and so it doesn't pay to get through it for get through its sake. If it doesn't have all the documentations in a way in which we can read it and understand it, you're going to get stuck in the system, and it's going to make it even harder to get your application through.
Okay, so I really know we're about to hit the hour mark. So I really first want to thank you at Cross River, because like you had mentioned, and we've seen it ourselves, that you've built a system that works best for a lot of our community issues, the questions, the nonprofits, the yeshivas, the shul. So I appreciate the time and effort that you guys came into focus and help, in your system and even in the guidance you've been giving. So if you don't mind, pass it on to the whole team. We really appreciate that focus. It's good to have someone to partner like that. Like we said, we've hit the 400 mark in terms of questions. I'm going to try compiling them, seeing which ones are repetitive. Some people just maybe posted the same question because I didn't answer them as we were going along. And we'll try putting together some type of document with all that information, with as many questions as possible. And if need be, we'll send out, we have everyone who registered, we have other lists, we will post these lists out to everyone.
Tzipora, it's the last question. It's here. Tzipora, each partner is one, okay? And so if you're a sole prop, it's one employee. It's not zero. Many people think that if they're a sole proprietor, independent contractor, they put zero. You have one employee, that is you and or your partners. So I got one knocked off, Shai, so keep that off.
Okay, so now 409. Thank you very much.
Everybody, thank you so much, Shai, to you and the team at the Aguda. I appreciate it. And obviously we'll do the best we can to get through all this Q&A, to compile it into a usable document. And obviously where applicable, we'll add it to our FAQs on our page.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Hatzlacha and bracha.
Thank you.
Thank you.